First Friday's attendees, I know that you all love to eat as much locally grown and produced food as you possibly can. But even the most committed of locavores know there are some foods that we simply cannot grow in our northern climate. And in today's global food economy, there are many foods that have become staples in our everyday diet that we can't imagine living our life without. Specifically for today's conversation, coffee and olive oil. Coffee, do you all have a cup in your hand? You want to just take a quick sip, please? That warm, delicious pick-me-up that we all need every morning. And good olive oil, did you guys get a chance to taste some samples? That flavor-enhancing accompaniment that almost any well-made dish has. As thoughtful consumers, how can we know that these products are produced in ways that match our food values? Sustainably grown, fair wages for farm workers. And how can our community form relationships with growers and producers in other places in the world that we know that we're sourcing these in ethical, sustainable, and community-enhancing ways? For today's food conversation, we're thankful to have two local entrepreneurs that have worked to develop supply chains across the world. Peter Schultz has been sourcing Greek olive oil for over 15 years and annually makes a trip to Mistress Estates to witness the harvest and pay homage to this precious tradition. And Dexter Dutton, along with Skylar and Nicole of Thunder Coffee, have been brewing coffee all over the Fargo-Moorhead area since 2017. Since the beginning, they've developed intentional relationships with coffee supply chain partners to ensure that they're not only sourcing the best beans, but also making sure that people along the chain are treated with dignity and respect. And with that, would you please join me in welcoming Peter and Dexter to the First Friday stage.
Good morning again, everybody. Thank you for having me. Annie, I'm watching you. Super. First off, thanks to Megan and Gia and Annie and Carrie and Dex and Nicole and Skylar and the whole crew that makes all this possible. It's a real treat to be here. I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit in my 6.5 minutes about olive oil, but more specifically how we bring it here and how we are trying to complicate and nuance this global product. Anytime you're importing, of course, you have a carbon footprint, and what we're trying to do is figure out a way to counterbalance some of that and also preserve a supply chain that is not only sustainable in the traditional way that it's used, but is also deeply regenerative for the farms and the land that this product is coming from. And before I get into that, you all need to know kind of where I'm coming from this. So I've been working on this olive oil project for some time, but my primary hat is I work for a small nonprofit up here in the High Plains that does prairie and wetland restoration. So my primary concern and how I spend most of my days is walking the land and trying to figure out ways to get landowners excited about permanent easements, basically enrolling their land in permanent protection. So when we're thinking about oil, in the back of my head always is not just thinking about the land and what we can extract, but how we can heal it. This is not really theoretical. It is really a fundamental necessity. So when we say sustainable, one of the unfortunate things, and I know you guys are all feeling me on this, one of the unfortunate things that comes along with this word is that there is this sort of dark shadow of greenwashing that overlies any of this. I mean, sustainability, fundamentally significant, has also become kind of co-opted in many respects by corporate interests to get sensitive, well-meaning, informed people to buy more stuff, right? So when we say sustainable, what do we really mean? And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. So the guy that we bring our oil from, his name is Eugene Ladopoulos. I met him about 20 years ago, and he has a farm in the hills overlooking ancient Sparta. This place is profoundly beautiful, and if you come and see Morgan's show tonight, you can see pictures of the spot. But what he is engaged in is a practice that is purely regenerative. There are no chemical inputs on this farm. They don't irrigate on this farm. So by chemical inputs, I also mean like H2O, right? There is nothing going into these trees, right, that isn't provided by nature itself. So what does this mean? What it means is that every year, every harvest is completely different. Depending on rainfall, soil conditions, atmospheric conditions, we're gonna get something new. So at its base, the material that we're bringing in is about as pure as we can make it. Since there are no inputs, it is just the gift of the tree itself, right? Now, the reason why this is important is when you go to your supermarket and you're buying regular olive oil, even if it's labeled extra virgin, These big brands, just like any fast food chain, has a market presence that is dependent upon consistency, right? When you buy your Bertolli, they want it to taste the exact same everywhere that it's sold worldwide, just like a Big Mac, right? With all the attendant sort of horrors that come with this, right? Our stuff by default is going to be fundamentally unique with every year. Again, because there are no chemical controls, all right? Everything is cold pressed, everything is harvested by hand. We're talking about guys with nets gently beating the stuff out of the trees, sometimes doing the trimming. I don't know if you guys have seen some of these things that are going on in Italy and Spain where they have this giant machine that comes in and grabs the tree and then shakes all the fruit out. Well, very nice, super efficient. The drawback is that it kills like 2 million birds a year when they do this, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to roll back on every single aspect the industrialized model of farming to produce something that is pure, sustainable, but fundamentally regenerative in that way. Okay, now, all that's well and good. How do we know? All right, that's the question. How do we know that it's pure, right? Well, we go there, right? And we don't go there alone. We bring our friends, basically. I mean, there are people in this room who have been to the farm, who have seen it firsthand. Because ultimately, what we're really trying to do is not just sell amazing olive oil, which we've got to do, we want to do, but what we want to do is we want to connect these two communities, right? And how do you do that? Well, you get a bunch of cool people in the room, you sit around, you drink some great wine, you eat some great food, you hang out, you get to know each other. So the bridge that we are constructing is absolutely about a supply chain. It is absolutely about great food. But what it's really about, it's about two little towns that have this relationship. And it's a relationship that is forged by people going over there and seeing where their food is made, right? If you don't know who is growing your food, you don't know who's growing your food. I know, it's a tautology, there you have it. If you don't know where the farm is, you don't know where the farm is. And if you don't know, you really don't know, and we want to know. But more importantly, we want to know the people, because it's the people that make this stuff great. Now, all that's well and good, but we still have this problem of getting it over here. So what are we doing to reduce waste and making things work? First of all, we only take pre-orders. What does this mean? It means there is not one box, not one bottle cap, not one bottle that is sold that does not have a home, right? The best way to reduce waste is just not to create it. So every year when we place our order, there will be not one shred of cardboard spent to produce it. Second, thank you, we are firmly committed to not branding this in any way. The proof in the pudding, of course, even a non-brand is a brand, as you guys all know. If you look at our bottles, I promise you there's not one label that's on straight. This is a little old Greek guy putting it on his shed by hand stamping each number. This is his brand. His brand is he doesn't care, right? He's just gonna put it on there and he's gonna be happy with it. We have no storefront. We have 2 retail partners in town, one at the Rourke, one at Burmom's, and that's it. So in each one of those instances, sort of no branding, no packaging waste, no storefront, what we're doing is we're trying to excise all of the middlemen and all of the fluff from the supply chain. At the end, we've got a farmer making great product, fantastic communities coming together at the lowest possible price. And in the end, we think that that's what makes this ultimately sustainable. 2 great communities coming together to produce something that is super affordable and absolute highest quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Way to go, Peter. That, man, I want to go eat some food with olive oil in it right now. Gosh dang, Mediterranean food. Hello, my name is Dexter Dutton. Thank you guys for coming out here today. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. Look at all you guys, you're packed in here. This is nuts. I am with Thunder Coffee. You guys might have seen myself or my brother or his wife around town, Skylar or Nicole. We've been doing coffee for the last 2 years in Fargo-Moorhead, and we've been very honored to get to serve pretty much each and every one of you in this room. I think I've served a cup of coffee to, which is just insane to me. And we love getting to drink coffee, but we are not the only ones in that. Over the last, the worldwide impact of coffee is just insane. We are not the only ones that drink it. And you can see that the global impact is just insane. There are over 25 million smallholder farmers, and that is where your coffee is coming from. There is a lot of this production taking place in developing countries, so you can notice that in the ways that the coffees are produced. the way that they're washed, and that all has an impact on how it tastes as well. And that also has a very important impact on how much you pay for your coffee. Directly correlates there. Where we are very lucky to get to work with an awesome roastery in Oklahoma City. Our friends at Killer Coffee have done an amazing job of sourcing great coffees. Myself and my brother and Nicole as well have not had the opportunity to get to go to Origin, which is something that is on our goal sheet. We'd love to make it there someday. Hopefully we're lucky enough. But we've got really good friends that have been and have built those relationships. So on a more local scale, in the United States alone, we drink a lot of coffee, and I'm talking about a lot of coffee. You can see the numbers there. That is super insane to me. That's $74.2 billion in 2015. I can't even picture what $1 billion of revenue looks like, but 74? Goodness gracious. As well as you guys drinking coffee on a daily basis has a direct impact in the United States. That is responsible for over 1.5 million jobs. You guys are doing great things just by sipping a cup of coffee. Who knew? And as well as that huge number down there, the total economical impact of the coffee industry in the United States, $225.2 billion. That takes up 1.6 of the total GDP in the United States. So keep drinking coffee, guys. It's very important. And so that whole supply chain is responsible for roasters, importers, baristas, delivery drivers, people that are packaging the coffee. So it's not just the people that are brewing coffee. It's not just the people that are growing coffee. It supports this whole supply chain along the way. Now your coffee is grown around the globe. You can kind of see here that this is where coffee likes to grow. It is a very picky plant. It does not like too hot or too cold, kind of like myself. I know, ended up in a very cold place for that predicament. But it likes to hang out around the 23rd, in between the 23rd parallel north and south around the globe. So you can kind of recognize some of your favorite coffee growing regions. Like today in Africa, on that little horn on the east side there, in Ethiopia, your coffee is from the Tikaset Wako farm. What is so unique about that is over the last, since coffee has been commercialized, coffee has had to have been exported through these larger groups and not been able to be traced back to a direct farmer in Ethiopia. There is a industry called the Exco, and that's where all the coffee had to come through to get to America, as well as other parts of the world. And with this coffee, it's just so insane that we are able to trace it back directly to a farm. So I feel very honored that you guys are getting to drink this one cup, because this is the culmination of years worth of work. So that's where your coffee comes from. That's where your coffee is grown, but where does your coffee come from? This is my homie Steve. I moved up here in 2017, and I got the opportunity to start brewing up coffee with the fam there. But before that, I was in Oklahoma. I was frequenting a coffee shop named Clarity Coffee that Steve has started. Hanging out there, drinking a lot of coffee, and it's so crazy. I remember the first shot of espresso that I was like, man, this is actually kind of dope. It tasted like pineapple. It was from Guatemala. And that kind of like kicked me down this rabbit hole of like, man, specialty coffee is really something awesome. What can we do to build that up? After Steve and I met, I just kept asking him questions. And that led to us building a pretty solid relationship. And a couple years later, he starts a roasting company where he gets to go to Origin, meet the people on the farm. This is the processing mill itself. Make sure that everything is up to par, that they're treating their workers well. establishing a good trade price and stuff like that. And then he sends it back to Oklahoma. This is Hannah Layton. She is the coffee roaster at Killer Coffee. Got to meet with her the last couple times I was down in Oklahoma, and she's awesome. She's doing a great job, as you guys can tell. After it gets roasted by Hannah, it comes up here to Fargo. And this is the part that really gets me stoked, because this is what has a direct impact on y'all. This is our barista Shane here at Thunder Coffee. This is him during the latte art throwdown. He and the rest of our staff are so amazing at being able to connect with people and really be able to serve them what they're needing. And I'm just so stoked to get to be in a community that loves drinking local coffee, even when that means that coffee is grown a couple thousand miles away. So thank you guys for your support. Good coffee. This is kind of like our mantra at Thunder Coffee. Good coffee tastes good and treats people well, and that's really what we're trying to achieve here. You know, we are not just about the specialty side of the drink. It's not about how it tastes, which is a good plus, but it's about how people experience that coffee. And we are just so thankful that we get to serve you guys in that way. Just a couple things to let you know as I wrap up here. Your dollar matters. That's a huge number, but it wouldn't exist if you guys didn't drink coffee. As well as your coffee isn't just grown somewhere, and we love to think about that. We love to think about going to origin and getting to meet that farmer, but that is a very small part of that supply chain. We want to support everyone along that way, as well as your continued support. We appreciate it so much, you know, and not just us. If you guys can find good people doing good things in any industry, I really want to encourage you to just support them wholeheartedly and help them do what they're doing. So that's all I've got for you. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
I will steal the clicker from you, though. Yes. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for those awesome insights. We always meet with our speakers before we host our conversations, and when we sat down with these two, we're like, oh, this is gonna be a good one. So for those who are new to First Fridays, this is the portion where you get to ask questions. So we know we keep it real brief with them, 5 to 6 minutes, and there is a lot more that you want to know about coffee, olive oil, and global sourcing. So if you want to raise your hand, I'd be happy to call on you. Or I have a whole list of questions too. Yeah, over there.
How do you start to find these partnerships? Because I'm sure it's not as easy as like Googling sustainable breed olive farmer. Like, where do you start to find the partnerships with places that aren't local?
Awesome question.
That's a superb question. So there's sort of two answers to this. One side of the answer is sort of based around the mystique of importing that a lot of my colleagues sort of like to generate. So we're going to throw that first part right out the window. This is how it works. You get on a plane and you go over there. And then you walk up to a dude and you ask him where the good stuff is at, and he tells you, and then you go meet her and you have a conversation. It's like that. I know it seems totally unsexy, but it is as simple as just going and making the connection. I think that one of the things that we're both kind of intrigued and interested in, both Dex and myself, is how we can keep those relationships like clear without a lot of stuff in the middle. And you know, there are really easy ways to do that now. I mean, technology has opened up avenues that can make all kinds of intimate, great, trusting friendships possible. So I think it's really as simple as that.
One of the things that we talked about in our conversation was certified free trade, or fair trade, excuse me. And I hope that you guys could each talk a little bit about that, because that's become kind of a global brand that is utilized to maybe give the illusion that this is something that I am buying something that is sourced in a way that is meeting my values. But you guys had some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. Well, first let me say that those certifications have done some very good things in our respective industries. But it does leave a lot of things to be wanted, especially coffee particularly. The fair trade price is usually set against Brazil, who, fair enough, produces over 6 times the next 10 countries below it. So there's a reason why it's supported by them. But for those farmers in the rest of the world, it doesn't do as much, and those certifications cost money that aren't always approachable to a dude with 150 hectares of growing space. It's just not possible for a lot of those smaller farmers.
Well, just to echo Dexter's comments, I work with coffee too. We have a farmer in Costa Rica. Her name is Shirley Loria. And I met her a couple years ago, and we started having a conversation about this. And one of the first things that I asked her was, well, do you have a stamp? Is it certified organic? Is this and that? And she looked at me, and she said, I can't pay the bribes. And I was like, bribes? What is the bribes? I mean, guys, I'm coming at this as a complete newbie. I didn't know what she meant. So then we continued this conversation, and the only way that some of these small operators can get this stamp is to become part of a larger co-op. Now, we're conditioned up here to think co-op equal good, and in many cases that's absolutely true, right? But if you're a small producer and you can't come up with $10,000 to become part of the machine to get the stamp, well, where are you? Well, you're left without the magical stamp, right? And these stamps, they really have impact, right? I was talking to my mom about this over Thanksgiving, and she would rather have an organic stamp on the bottle than actually know that it's actually organic, right? I mean, these markings really do have an effect on consumer behavior. So, I mean, I think that going back to sort of our conversation before is that, there are, as Dexter said, there are some incredible things that come out of this, especially with regards to raising awareness. But the best stamp you can have on anything is knowing the woman who made it, right? And that has no impact visually when you're shopping, but it's soulful and it's truthful.
And kind of going off of that, because one of the conversations we had, kind of paralleling the fair trade certification to the organic certification, is that we know that a lot of our local farmers do not have the organic certification that are selling at our local farmers markets, but we know that their practices are probably beyond the organic requirement, but they do not pay that price. And you have the advantage with local of being able to go and have that direct conversation with the farmer, but then you run into that challenge that people can't go and directly talk to your producers, so you guys kind of serve as that middleman to share that message. So I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about that in terms of how you try to be that bridge to let people know that.
Yeah, that's definitely a learning point as a entrepreneur, is being able to communicate that effectively to your consumer. At any event that we set up at, one of the first things we get asked is this fair trade? Well, no, but for good reason. That only certifies a certain price above the commodity price of coffee. This is specialty coffee being traded at a higher rate, so it really has no bearing on your coffee. We're paying for quality, not setting it up against this standard here. And we really think that is the way that those practices should be done.
I don't have much to add other than that it's just a matter of continuing to build those bridges out, right? I mean, when you are the person who's bringing it, I mean, we're hoping, and I think this is true for Dex too, we're hoping that you guys will trust us to know what we're doing. And part of our brand, such as it is a kind of faith that you all are bestowing upon us that we're trying to earn, so that you can feel really good when you drink Thunder Coffee or when you use one of our products or whatnot. And I think that the truthfulness of that faith is then reinforced every year you go. We're always going back, we're always checking, so it feels like something that can build up over time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Other questions? Yeah, Carrie.
I'm sort of interested in maybe the room, thinking about what other products would we all like to see here? Places that, we could go get on the plane and start creating the relationships in order to have products. Part of the advantage of coffee and olive oil is it's not like fruit, right? In terms of its shelf life and that kind of thing. But I'm thinking about what are the other kinds of things that aren't here, but are in other parts of the world where we should be building those relationships because it would be mutually beneficial.
That's a great comment, Carrie, and we did discuss that in our conversation too. Things like tea and chocolate and fish and some of those products that we love to enjoy in this community, but how can we form more intentional relationships like this? And then what is the source of those products in our community? Do we have a physical space where people can know that they can buy this global food that has this? So if anybody has a business idea and wants to further this, we've got some ideas. Did you guys have any other comments on that? So kind of going off of, so much of what was shared, and as you're listening to it, you're like, of course, this is so great. I love knowing the people. But then on the counter side of that, you hear people say that this is elitism. And this is something that is only for people of a certain socioeconomic class to have this type of decision making in their food purchases. So how do you kind of respond to comments like that?
That's good. Well, hierarchies exist,
Yeah.
and the ability to have a choice is a privilege by itself. And I think that pretending that it's not is doing a disservice to all of our community members and also to reality. So there's that. I think that in this particular case, what we are trying to do is actually open up access to quality and to experiences that might not otherwise be available. Now that itself is kind of an elite concern in a way, but once you get to a certain point, there's almost no way to escape that bubble in a way. For us, the best thing that we can do is eliminate those pieces of waste so that what we're selling is actually affordable, if that makes any sense. So in addition to being sort of efficient and environmentally friendly, there can also exist hand in hand a kind of a justice sense. If you go to New York City and you look at some of the stuff, you're gonna pay $55, $60, $80 a bottle for some of the stuff that we're selling for 10. Right? I mean, we're competing with mass-produced garbage that you can just buy in Hornbachers, right? And this is just a small little outfit. So I think that one response might be to say, anytime that you're talking about like highbrow food, there's gonna be an element of sort of privilege that's gonna creep into that. That's probably unavoidable. But the best thing that we might be able to do is acknowledge that straight up and say, one of the things we can do is to try to make it accessible. I think that might be a beginnings of the start of a conversation, maybe.
Yeah, that excellent right there. That's by definition, specialty coffee is specialty. It is a luxury that we even get to drink it. It's something that we really take for granted here because it doesn't grow around here. It always blows my mind sipping on a cup of coffee that was flown or shipped thousands of miles, and not just that, it was roasted another almost 1,000 miles away and then sent up to us, right? That's not something that we should really take for granted, but it's been so imbued in our culture since the 1700s that we just kind of like, oh yeah, coffee, I'll pay 60 cents a cup. Well, probably doesn't take 60 cents to grow that coffee, in the producing country and get it here, especially if you want it to taste good as well as be able to treat people well along the way. It's just one of the things that. It's a luxury, but we can, again, like Peter said, start to introduce people to ways to make it more accessible, as well as cutting down that supply chain, make it really more affordable to accept that luxury.
So, Dex, you gave me another thing to think about here. In addition to sort of the price points for consumers, there's also the kind of wage to the producers, right? Now, in our case, we know for a fact that our farmer is making probably 3 to 4 times, that's 300 to 400% on what he's selling us than what he could sell to his co-op. Like, we know it. We know what the actual price is for extra virgin olive oil. This is a commodity that you can track by the second on a number of different online engines, right? We also know that the price that he's selling it to us is far and away above what he could get anywhere else. So in that sense, there is a really interesting kind of redistribution of wealth from, elites, if we just want to say it like that, to farmers. We like that. Of course, sometimes when you're looking at this, you're like, good grief, this guy's charging us. But we told him to. At the very beginning of this, yes, charge us. I'm like, oh my God, it's getting completely out of hand. But then you go back and you're like, no, this is what we said. We're going to keep on rolling. But the joy of that, right, is that he is then able to continue his practice and look to expand. Going back to the regenerative piece of all this, if our little guy Eugene can buy more land that includes no chemical inputs. I mean, the boars are plowing the field. That is the input, right? You have boar poop and boar nose. That's it, right? Oak trees are growing up. There's herbs everywhere. There's no plows. There's no nothing. If he can continue to expand that practice, then those regenerative possibilities are also growing. So not only is he making more money, he's taking that money, which is an incredible price, and then growing an outfit that is itself in line with our ecological values. So maybe that's another way we could sort of navigate that particular question.
Did anyone taste notes of boar this morning? Other questions? Yeah, Jack.
Question for Peter now. Can you tell us if after it's been processed, how do they ship it? Like by plane or by boat? Or?
Right, sure. So it'll be pressed, it'll sit in the settling vat, it'll be bottled, and then traditionally what will happen is it'll be loaded on a truck and then be part of a regular container line. This is not the most ecologically friendly model. We actually have had conversations with some guys in the Netherlands and in Greece about bringing the stuff over by sail, like starting it in Crete or in Sparta, and it lands in Duluth and we go pick it up, which I think would be awesome. And then we say, well, I bet we could find some people who would actually like to learn how to sail on that trip. And he's like, oh yes, this is what we will do. They will pay to be the sailors. So there could be the wind-powered aspect of all this. This is something we've considered, but right now it's we are one small little fraction of a container that gets dropped onto a ship as part of these massive things that are leaving Antwerp to come over.
Relaunch the Yumcombe ship and
Amazing. I see a project.
That's great. Other questions? Yeah.
Maybe not a question, but Dex, you've referenced specialty coffee several times, and can you just expand on what the difference between specialty coffee and commodity coffee is?
Yeah.
I think it's a deep dive. But.
Right. Yeah. Just kind of the overview of it. You've got your crop that looks all right, right? As a farmer, you're growing these things, and they look all right. They're good enough to consume, right? But you can't take the time to pay attention to your entire crop, right? You're growing thousands of trees to try and pay back your loans on your property, right? And you're trying to get as much yield out of your crop as possible. So some of that stuff that isn't the cream of the crop is what is making it to that commodity grade. We're familiar with grading scales on any food that you buy, right? Grade A beef versus whatever else. There's a distinct difference between beef that you will buy from a local ranch versus what you would buy at a grocery store, right? You can recognize that difference. It's very similar in the way that, the stuff that people are hand picking off of the trees at its perfect ripeness is going to taste astronomically different than the coffee from the farms where they drive those trucks down the lane and they shake the trees and they get branches and twigs and birds and whatever else into that bag that gets ground up and fermented together and shipped over to the United States. It's a very, very large difference in quality there. Is that...
And so when you're out in the field visiting with the farmers, are you finding, are they interested? Is there a propensity to kind of restore the land in some areas, or is it pretty much hitting a wall sometimes when you talk about that? I'm thinking about, the crops that we're growing right now, particularly soybeans and corn, are really kind of markets of the past. And I'm wondering, if we can heal the land by growing some things that are more sustainable. And I'm talking about hemp that we used to be able to grow. What are you seeing out there?
Sure, that's a great question. My gosh, and it could go on forever. I think the best and most honest answer is that it's very much a mixed bag. We don't approach landowners from the point of view of being ecologists, which we are. We approach these women and men and families as business people. And what we are interested in doing is helping them get their wet stuff, basically, turning that lead into gold, and that is how we're framing it. In some instances, it is like, it's exactly as you say, it's like hitting a brick wall, and that's fine. In other instances, there is interest and skepticism, and then on the other far extreme, there is great enthusiasm. So you have an entire range from flat out no to let's get moving. The interesting thing, at least from the point of view of Minnesota, is that in the last year, we have new incentives and new programs that are coming online, which are raising the value of these wet pieces so that we're almost able to offer market value for easements, which is extraordinary. And of course, that has shifted the picture. In fact, we just finished closing a project in Stearns County where the landowners were actually getting paid for the easement almost what they would pay for the farmland. Now, when you're getting to that point, when you're looking at shaky commodity prices and folks who might not continue farming or kids who have no interest in farming, we are seeing a large amount of interest, especially from families that are coming out of hunting tradition, about getting enrolled in these things. Because what they're able to do is they're able to sell that easement, and then 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, or if they're giving this property to heirs, it's still fantastic hunting land where you also have values are going up. So there are real economic incentives, and the economic incentives are new to the last 2 years of what we're able to do. So I'd say in the balance, it's a range, but there's definitely been an uptick in the last 24 months in terms of levers that we can use to engage and start conversations, if that helps.
Excellent. We have time for one more question, if anybody has a burning one. Yeah, Kayla.
So as we try and think deeply about equity and how we eat and our sourcing, and as more and more farmers are facing catastrophic effects of climate change, how does that factor into how you plan for your businesses, your importing, and what do we owe these farmers?
That is a
I got chills.
Yeah, that is an awesome question. Yeah, we really do have a responsibility to these farmers because their end goal isn't, for us to have an awesome cup of coffee. I mean, that is a byproduct. They are trying to survive. They are trying to make a living, right? And I think we often forget that they're just trying to survive, same as any one of us in here. So paying what we need to along the way to make sure that they can continue to do that and also continue to provide us an awesome product is paramount to us, and especially as we dive into the roasting world and sourcing these contracts and meeting these producers, that's on the forefront of us. On the consumer side, I really encourage you guys to purchase coffee that you can track down to a co-op or a direct farmer. A lot of those African countries, they sell them through co-ops, right? That it's still kind of the way it's been done for the last 30, 40 years. It's going to continue to do that for the next couple of years with these smaller farms happening, being able to import directly. Where in Central and South America, most times you will be able to trace it back to a direct farm and to a direct farmer. And if you're buying coffee from a place that you can't do that, I would highly recommend purchasing it from somewhere else.
This is a great question, and in fact, I think one way to really begin to start answering it is we can talk about olive oil certainly, but I think there is another project that is local that speaks to this so perfectly. I have to bring it up, and we already heard Audubon Dakota up here doing their awesomeness. Does everybody know about Marshall and his team's bird-friendly beef initiative? Mm-hmm. Raise your hand with pride if you know about this. Okay, so some people. All right, now. This is an extraordinary project, and I think that it perfectly addresses this concern about global climate and local impacts and how these things are interconnected. So here you have a guy who has partnered with ranchers across the High Plains to basically certify this beef as bird-friendly. Well, what does that mean? It means that these cattle are basically grazing on prairie, right? 60 million acres, right, of prairie is being turned over by these beef cattle. Now you might think, well, isn't cattle horrible for the environment, right? Aren't cows horrible for the environment? That is exactly what we've been taught. I mean, ecologists like myself have been telling you all this for a long time. And certainly when you're butchering the Amazon and putting these cattle out there to get your Whopper, your Big Mac, this is an absolute nightmare. I mean, you probably couldn't get worse. But at the exact same time, there are alternative models where these cattle are basically replacing bison in terms of their role within prairie ecosystems, and not just producing incredible beef, beautifully grown, sustainably raised beef humanely raised beef, but they are healing the land on which this beef is raised. Now, think about this from another angle really quick. 60 million acres of prairie, of grasslands with this beef cattle. What happens if all that beef cattle goes away? Well, from my point of view, because I'm a habitat guy, right? I care about preserving nature and those ecosystems. Well, all that stuff goes into corn and soybeans again, right? This is exactly what we do not want to see happen. So it's programs like this. I think it honestly, in terms of local phenomenon where you have just profoundly impactful impacts that can be broadcast to larger economic and environmental concerns, this is such a great example where you have ranchers, NGOs, and governments working together to regenerate and heal landscapes that also happen to produce an incredibly great product that ranchers are making more for that heal the earth. I mean, it is a win-win-win-win-win for this. So I'm not just, I mean, I love you guys, but I mean, we have to talk about this because this is, it was invented here in Fargo-Moorhead, and it is one of the most profoundly impactful ecological initiatives in the world, and I think we should own that. So that might be one example to start that kind of conversation.
Love it, love it. Well, so yeah.
Yes, come on!
So we wrap up every First Fridays with a final question, and I know you guys have kind of touched on this a lot through your presentations, but this audience today, what can we do? What can we do to support the work that you guys are doing, as well as this greater idea of creating more intentional relationships with the source of the products that we're consuming?
Yeah, as I've touched on before, keep drinking coffee, guys. It tastes good. It's good for you. A lot of polyphenols in there, a lot of antioxidants. You're healthier for it. It reduces your chance of, it's like 7 types of cancer. So drink it up to 5 cups a day. Do it, and you'll live forever. So keep doing that, as well as be really intentional about where you guys are buying it from. Don't get me wrong, I love a bad cup of coffee every now and again. And it's a certain place in my heart where like commodity coffee just, it hits sometimes, and that's okay. But for the majority of your coffee consumption, please consider supporting local businesses that have ties to these larger supply chains that produce amazing products.
So how many of y'all bought potatoes from Bjorn this Thanksgiving? Anybody buy potatoes from, okay, so there were people. This is basically just a redux of Dexter's point. You vote with your consumption. You're a human being, you eat. Pretending that you're not a consumer is absurd. You all, maybe you did have breakfast, but you're certainly gonna have lunch of some sort. This guy makes and distributes some incredible potatoes, right? That's just one example. If we can be intentional, like Dexter is saying, I know it takes a little bit of extra effort, but there are all kinds of conversations happening around where we can get that effort down. We can create these sustainable habits, cultivate these sustainable habits, which is one of my favorite lines from Megan ever, and create ecosystems and economic systems that heal the earth. It is completely possible. So yeah, eat more potatoes.
Note to end on. Thank you so much, Peter. Bjorn, you must be thrilled. Thank you guys so much for the awesome presentation today. I feel really inspired to go out and be a much more thoughtful consumer, and I hope you all are as well.